Now, as we get into September, you can really tell how your food plots are doing. And we could have done everything perfect. Could have planted perfect, the right timing, right seed, right conditions, right fertilization efforts, weed control, and your food plots are a bust. Whether it's overbrowsing, drought, whatever it might be, there's lots of reasons for failure in food plots, and it's not an exact science. It's kind of like farming. There's good years, bad years. The difference with food plotting versus farming is we can have food plot salvages. We can actually salvage the hunting season. It's not typical in farming that you could have a destroyed corn crop or beans and you go in there and just plant something else and enjoy the harvest. That's not the way it works. We're lucky and fortunate in food plotting. For one, we don't have to make a living at this, but at two, that we can actually salvage a bad plot for whatever reason. Think about all the ways naturally a plot can fail, let alone human error. When you factor that in, boy, there's a lot of ways that food plots can fail, but there's a lot you can do about it, and that's a good thing. So number 4, we'll start from bottom to top, but this is a great time if your plots look a little weak, if they're yellowish, purple, red, they're starved for moisture, make sure that you get that fertilizer on there. A lot of times, just slightly lighter green leaves, say in brassica, especially in the corn and earlier in the season, but you have to add urea sometimes, and that'll give those plants the nutrients it needs. That's why corn a lot of times will turn yellow in the summertime or really light green. It's just being starved for nitrogen. You add that urea on there. And that's what I do. That's why we want that corn, that deep color. And that's the same you want that brassica. So we're actually adding urea as a planned fertilization effort. And whether it's planned for you or not, it's a great way to turn those yellowish green leaves a little bit darker green and have a great hunt and enjoy that plot. And then plot boost is something from deer crow that we spray on about 5 to 6 weeks in, and that turns those leaves green, keeps the nutrients high, and so that's a great 1-2 whammy for making sure they have healthy plants going into the hunting season. Now, gly and rye is something I want you to consider. A lot of food plots fail because of weeds, and despite what you read online, weeds and food plots are very bad going into the fall. Deer might prefer a weedy field with mixed plots during the summertime because there's so much native browse in there, but all that native browse is dead, dormant, dried out, and non-attractive going into the hunting season. So there's a big difference. You look at studies in clover that has weeds in it. Those studies in summer show that deer prefer that. Those studies in fall, they're non-existent. They look at them at the wrong time of the year because great deer herds are not built during the summer. They're built during November, and then October, December, then September, January. You have to look at it that way and make sure that you're hitting and getting the most. So a lot of weeds have taken over plots, and what weeds do with plots is you might only have 50% of weeds in the plots. That leaves you with only 10% of your actual intended forage because the weeds take up space, they take up nutrients, and that only take up that 50% of space, but they take up a huge amount of nutrients at those. It seems like weeds always get their nutrients no matter what, but our food plot forages do not. So it can really stunt your plants, and this is a great time to look at this and say, you know what, this is not what I intended. It might be that you're seeing a lot of grasses in there, and it's a time you could use clethodim, which is or some type of grass-specific herbicide. It's just going to take the grass out of there. But it's also a great time if everything's choked out and doing poorly, great time to spread rye at 200 pounds per acre in more like a Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Minnesota setting. In early September or mid-September, you're looking at 200 pounds per acre more in that West Virginia, Kentucky, Southern Illinois line. And then even further south, you can go as late as October 1st down in Louisiana, Alabama, in extreme southern portions. But you're putting 200 pounds of rye, you're just broadcasting that into your weedy half field of food plot forage, and then you're going over with 2 quarts per acre of glyphosate. You can spray that glyphosate right over the top of the seed. It won't do any damage to it. And in that way, you can have a great crop. Even though you had a weedy field going into the season, you can really turn it around. And if you have weed growth that's appreciable, and you have lots of soil that's exposed, then don't forget about at least 100 pounds of peas per acre, maybe even 25 pounds of oats, and you could even add 5 pounds of tillage radish for something those are all quick start. They grow fairly fast, but those will grow well because you get them on the soil. Then you spray. You can use the cultipacker like we use the Packer Max, smash it all down after you spray. It'll keep those weeds down, make sure they diminish in value. You never want to just throw seed into a weedy field, not spray. The seeds aren't going to be able to be viable. The plants won't be viable. They'll germinate, but they'll die because sun doesn't get to them. So that's a really good plot salvage method, especially if it's really weedy in your plots. Now, tillage radish fill-in, number 2. Brassica crops, you might have areas that are more, maybe they got burned out because there wasn't enough thatch. Maybe the deer browsed them in certain areas versus others. But bottom line is tillage radish is a quick growing brassica. You can put 7-8 pounds per acre. Just throw that right onto the top of the soil before rain, and you can get quick germination and fill in those spots. And of course, if all else fails, you don't have a lot of weeds, you just don't have crops, you're overbrowsed, it didn't grow, then 200 pounds per acre of rye in those northern sections in early September, all the way down to the south, extreme southern portions, more October 1st, is a great plot salvage. And if you want to even back that up another month, then you go 300 pounds per acre of rye at that time. And you might even find with your brassica crops, there's not only do you have holes in them, but they're half eaten, they're going downhill fast because deer overbrowsed them on small plots. Just throw the rye on there, enjoy that plot salvage technique. And bottom line is, the noise doesn't matter. What do I mean by that? Is deer don't seem to mind you going in with equipment, working on food plots, doing what you need to do in early September, mid-September, even October 1st, getting that done, get out of there. I keep my voices down if someone's helping. I keep the machines running. You just get in, get out of there, and they seem to tolerate that type of activity. Yeah, it might hurt a hunt that night, the next day after that. Deer will forgive you pretty quick. They forgive that machinery, especially in those food locations. They seem like they're used to it. And this might hurt the flow a little bit, but we have a bonus number 5. And Dylan brought this up, and I think it's a really good one. He has clients asking about this right now. But if you're in ag area, the ag area offers a little bit of a bonus. You can go to the area farmer, and if your food plots have failed, maybe buy an acre of beans, maybe buy an acre of corn. That is always an option, but at the same time, I've had a lot of clients in standing beans plant rye later, tillage radish earlier, even brassica if those beans are turning brown by the end of August and they're actually starting to mature. It gets into early September time. You can put brassica on the ground, get good sunlight into it in more southerly areas, and then certainly the radish or the rye and wheat offer a great option for spreading heavy into those standing beans and even corn, and then making sure you have that great crop down below. I spread rye in my corn. That's something that I will do this year. We did tillage radish last year too, but it's a great way to put nutrients back into the soil for the following spring. And so adding that rye can be a great benefit for not only your deer hunting, but also for that replanting of that corn in that same location the following spring. And then don't forget about brassica or just plain, if you can afford it, buying an acre of beans or corn. And make sure you get some beans and corn away from the wood line where they're not all browsed down and eaten. I've even seen areas where farmers have offered to allow someone to keep the outside 5 rows of corn. They're not going to take it. And usually there's not much available next to those wood lines, so pay attention to that too. But ag areas, you get that little bit of bonus, and I hope that helped. It's just one more way that you can make sure you can have great plots going into this fall. Even though you might have had a bad start, you can always turn it around. There's always a way. Use some of these 4 techniques right here. Remember, the noise doesn't matter, and have great food plots this fall. Well, I'm real excited, folks. I appreciate you watching this video, but my next web class, How to Plant Food Plots, How to Design Your Food Plot Program, is out. And it really goes through a step-by-step process for not only how to plant your food plots, but why you should plant them, where you should plant them, what you should plant, how you should create them. There's a lot of different modules. Ends up about 30 videos altogether. I urge you to check that out. We're out here completing our food plot work today, and we do that in a pretty strict pattern so we can find success this fall. Food plots shouldn't be a guessing game. Take the guesswork out of food plots and food plots planting, and check out the web classes. I have my How to Design Your Whitetail Property, the food plots for the next web class in the series, and I hope you enjoy it. I hope you check it out, and let me know what you think if you end up purchasing that, and I think you'd be well pleased that you did.